In this video, we're going to put all our code onto GitHub, or as we usually say, we're pushing it to a remote branch. And to get started, head over to github.com, and as soon as you're logged in, just click here on this plus button and create a new repository. Now, once more, if the page looks a bit different at the point you're watching this video, then just search somewhere on the page for new repository. Okay? So, first off, you need to give the repository a name. And so I'm calling it Naders here, which for me is not possible because I already have a Naders repository. So I'm just calling it Naders rec for recording, but you can just go ahead and call it Naders. Then we can also add a description, which I'm not going to do, and then we can set it to public or private. And I think that right now, even the free accounts can have private repositories. And so private repos, as the name says, only you can see, and you can then also invite other people. And with public repos, they are of course visible to everyone. And so they are perfect for open source code. Now in this case, I'm just leaving it private, then leave all of these defaults. And here it's very important that we do not initialize this new repo with a README, because that would then create conflicts a bit later on. So we really want this repo to be brand new and completely empty here on GitHub. Okay, so doing this here is similar to what we did before locally with git init. The only difference is that this time it really is on GitHub. So it's a remote repository now. Great. Now the goal here is to basically push all our local code into this remote repository. Okay, and in order to be able to do that, we need to let our local repository know about this remote repo that we just created here. Okay, so basically we have to kind of connect them. And so that's exactly what is set here. So what we want to do is to push an existing repository from the command line. And so let's go ahead and copy this code here to our command line here. Okay, so what is this going to do? Well, it will add a remote branch. And so remote means that it's a hosted branch, basically. And this remote branch, or you can also call it this remote repository, is going to be called origin, and it is located in this URL here. So at this location. So hit enter, and that's it. So now these two repositories are basically connected. And so at this point, we are ready to do git push, which is the action to basically copy our local code onto our remote branch in our remote repository. Then the name of the remote branch, which is origin, and then the name of the local branch, which is master. All right. So git push origin master, hit return, and then that should of course take some time. Now first up, it also asks us for our username, which is just the email address, and probably you don't need to do this anymore because you already specified it, but I didn't before in the video, remember that. And so let's do that now. And by the way, that's just because I'm using a different account on my computer to record these courses. And so I don't really use Git here, and so that's the reason why I needed to do it. Now anyway, it now asks me for my password, and so write your password here, hit return as well, and so then it should start sending the data to your remote branch. So it's doing that work now. You can see all the statistics, how many files there are, your upload speed, and how much there is already done. All right, so I will come back once this is finished. Okay, and that's it. So let's now check that out here on GitHub. So let's reload. And indeed, here we go. And indeed, here we have all the files that we just added to our commit before. All right. So you see that all of these here say initial commit, and then this file, so app.js, where we actually did some modifications, it then says added a comment, which was the commit message that we used for that specific commit, where we only committed this one file. Remember that? So it actually was like 6 minutes later. Great. So let's just take a look at that. So how it looks like here in GitHub. And so, yeah, that's all our code nicely hosted now basically in this place. So in GitHub. You also see that our ignored files are not here. So the node module and also the configuration file. So exactly the files that we really do not want in a repository, well, they are now not here, just as expected. Now, by the way, the opposite operation of push that we just did is the pull operation. So imagine you're working on two different computers and want to start to work on one computer and then continue on the other one. And so to do that, you could push the code on one computer onto GitHub and then on the other one, simply pull it. And that would be very simple. So the command would be almost the same, but instead git pull origin and then master. So the branch that you're currently working in. So I'm not going to do that now, but instead I will create a README file. So that's a very standard file that every single repository should have. So let's do that here. And the standard really is, so not a folder, but a file. And so again, the standard is to call it readme.md, which stands for Markdown. So this file here is written in Markdown. And so let's use this hash symbol here to add the main title. So let's call this Nater's application. And then just a paragraph below that. Built using modern technologies. Well, that's not really correct. Technologies, Node.js, Express, MongoDB, Mongoose, and friends, let's say. All right. So let's save this now. And if we now say git status, you should see this as a new file. And indeed, here it is. Now actually, after closing and opening again the VS Code app, this part here of the application actually started to work. And so now you see here that the readme.md file shows up under the changes. And it shows up here as U, which means untracked. Okay? And also, as I mentioned before, you can actually see that here in the file tree. So it's green now. Okay? And if you change, let's say, another file here, so for example, changing here to application, give it a save, then you see here this M, which stands for modified. Okay? And it also shows up here. Okay? Here, this bar then becomes blue because now it's modified. So this is a modification and not an insertion. So before it was green because I inserted code, and now it's blue because I modified. And here I can also very easily go back. So I want to discard the changes. And so you see it goes back to what it was before. Okay. Anyway, let's now add this file to the staging area. So git add, and then you can use tab to autocomplete as always. And then let's now commit it. So git commit the message added a readme like this. Okay, and now let's also push it to our remote branch just so we can take a look at it in GitHub. So that's git push origin master. So let's take a look at that here. And now here you see that readme that we just created. And you see also that the commit message for this one is added a readme 1 minute ago. All right, great. And so that's it. That's the absolute fundamentals that I wanted to show you in this lecture and the last one about Git and also GitHub. All right. Now another thing here about GitHub is that many times when starting a new project, we actually do it the other way around. So I first create the repo on GitHub and already with a README file. And then after that, I pull that repo onto my local computer. All right. And so that will then automatically connect the local repository with the remote one. And that just makes the setup a little bit easier. So many times I do it just like this. But of course, the way I explained it in this video is also perfectly fine. Anyway, I hope that this has been useful for you, and so in the next video we will start preparing the app for deployment, because there are still some small changes that we need to do, so some modifications in order to be really ready to deploy the application.